make sure that when you're going through the toolkit that you're going through each folder of the meeting. It's important for the facilitator to know what's in everything, and it will set you off on a really good foot. So meeting 2. So the purpose of meeting 2 is twofold. So there's 2 purposes. One is to discuss what it means to end homelessness. So, you know, why are we meeting? Why are we committing 8 weeks of meetings to this? Why are we committing to do this over the course of 2 days? However you guys decide to do it, why are we having these conversations? These conversations, and I said this in an email I sent out a couple weeks ago, these conversations are not solely to discuss the development of coordinated entry, right? As we talked about in last webinar, the purpose of systems change is to create that fertile soil for the development of your coordinated entry process. And so in this meeting, it's really critical that you establish what the goal is. And the goal is that we're ending homelessness in Corpus Christi. The goal is that we're ending homelessness in Abilene, that we're ending homelessness in Cameron County, wherever you may be. And so that's the first thing that you're going to be doing. So starting with this meeting, there's going to be a folder on facilitator prep. This is information that'll be useful for the facilitator when you're having this meeting. There are 2 things that I suggest that you absolutely read. The first one is defining the scope of the homeless problem. So the second purpose of this meeting is to use all the definitions that you gathered from all the different providers and also the data points to define what is the homeless problem in our community. So this is a really great piece that came from Focus Strategies out of California. They have really great briefs on housing crisis response systems, and they have one that talks about the different steps. I actually use a lot of this information to inform the toolkit. So this gives you an overview of how to use all the data that you're going to be gathering to define the scope of the problem in your community. And then the second one, so you'll see here, these say supplemental. If you want to read more about just developing a problem statement in general, you can read those too. So those aren't, it's just extra information if you're interested in it. And then the last one, the other one that I suggest that you read prior to the meeting is this communicating effectively about ending homelessness. USICH released this a couple of weeks ago. I thought it was really great. I really related to it. If you guys remember when we started going out with coordinated entry in the pilot communities, we didn't really open with it's possible to end homelessness because at that time not very many communities had done that. I don't think any communities had done that. And so our why for doing coordinated entry was because HUD said so. And now we know better. Now we know that coordinated entry is a critical piece of your housing crisis response system, and this development of this streamlined, standardized, coordinated housing crisis response system is what ends homelessness. And coordinated entry is merely a piece of that. And so I have in the last 2 years been really trying to change the framing of why to do coordinated entry, why to do systems change. And it really is about ending homelessness. 30-something communities, and I think 2 or 3 states have done it. So we can't really say that it's not possible anymore. So this is a really great piece. It's based off of a report from the Enterprise Communities Partners, which I thought was really great. And like I said, it really spoke to me. I did a meeting in Denton in January, and I opened with, so this is what it means to end homelessness. In any of your professions, can you tie it to anything that you focus on? And actually a fire marshal was like, yeah, like fires, we're never going to end fires. Fires will always be around, but what we can do is do a better job of educating people on how to prevent them, and then we can get better at putting them out. So wonderful. And then somebody else from a hospital said it. So I highly recommend that you guys read this. I highly recommend a lot of things. So again, the 2 things that you should read are the defining the scope of the problem, and then the USICH communicating an end to homelessness. So like I said, the 2 purposes are focusing on ending homelessness. So what you're really going to be doing is you're going to be discussing what it means to end homelessness. The pre-reading materials that are available in meeting 1 that you'll be sending through follow-up are really about like the importance of using data to quantify homelessness, the importance in using data to end homelessness. So people aren't really going to get a lot of pre-reading about what does it mean to end homelessness, even though what they read is going to be very similar to the definition on a housing crisis response system. So what you're going to do is just start with a conversation about, when I say ending homelessness, what do you think? Is it possible? What does it mean to you? If you don't believe it's possible, why do you think it's not possible? I have included some potential discussion questions in the agenda. Again, those are potential, so just try to be really fluid with the conversation. Try to ask questions. Try to ask open-ended questions. That's a really important role of the facilitator. I've also included several videos for you guys to show. So this first one, every time I'm having a hard day, I watch it and I cry and then I get back to work. It's really great. It's from 100,000 Homes. It's called We Can End Homelessness. And it's about the 100,000 Homes campaign and how they ended homelessness for 105,000 of the most difficult to serve people. It's wonderful. You're going to show it. Hopefully people will start to be bought into it. Then what you're going to do is you're going to hand out a handout, right? You're going to hand out the handout. This is the goal, right? When I say ending homelessness, right, we all know in this room that it's going to be entirely impossible to completely end homelessness. There are too many other factors that cause homelessness, and unfortunately we don't have control over those things. So criminal justice involvement, the economy, there's a lot that plays into it. And so what an end to homelessness means, and this was defined by the United States Interagency Council on Homelessness, or USICH, is an end to homelessness means that in every community there will be a systematic response in place that ensures that homelessness is prevented whenever possible, or if it can't be prevented, it is rare, brief, and a non-reoccurring experience. So the things that pop out to me with that are, 1, an increased emphasis on prevention. We don't really do that right now. There's not a lot of research on targeting your prevention resources, but it is a very critical piece of the puzzle to be able to prevent people from even entering the system. And diversion is tied in with homelessness prevention. The idea with diversion is people present at emergency shelter and you're trying everything you can to connect them with any support networks or resources that they may have at their disposal. And then the other piece is, should they become homeless, we want that episode to be rare, and we want that episode to be brief and non-recurring, and then in general we want homelessness to be rare. So basically every community will have the capacity to quickly identify and engage people at risk of and experiencing homelessness, intervene to prevent the loss of housing, and divert people from entering the homeless services system. And then lastly, when homelessness does occur, provide immediate access to shelter and crisis services without barriers to entry, so that's where low barrier comes in, while permanent stable housing and appropriate supports are being secured, and quickly connect people to housing assistance and services tailored to their unique needs and strengths to help them achieve and maintain stable housing. So our job is not done until people achieve and maintain stable housing. This will come into play next meeting, because this is essentially also the definition of a housing crisis response system, right? This is exactly what we want our housing crisis response system to be. So in the next meeting you'll say, oh, remember when we read the goal to end homelessness and what the definition of ending homelessness is? That is the description of a housing crisis response system. So you'll start noticing that we really tried to layer everything together. So you'll pass that out, you'll talk about it. So the second video that I have on here, which is, and I don't even know how to say her name, which is terrible, so I'm just going to say Becky's speech from National Alliance to End Homelessness in 2014. I was there that year, and she talked about the matrix, and how homeless services is like the matrix, and when you don't take the pill, this is what it's like, and then when you take the red pill, this is what it could be like. Ideally, we want to be like in the matrix, right? So it's really great. She talks about the emphasis of identifying people, using your data, all that stuff. So I thought it was, I thought it was very inspirational at the time, and I still think it's really inspirational, which is why we included it here. And then what you'll do is you'll debrief, right? So this whole part is, what are your initial thoughts and assumptions when I say ending homelessness? Okay, let's educate you a little bit about what it actually means. And then now what do you think? Has it changed your viewpoint? If not, why? If yes, how? So it's really, what we really wanted to do with the toolkit is provide you guys time to have these really difficult discussions. The work that we see in collective impact is that the critical role that the Backbone organization plays in efforts to do collective impact is that they provide this safe space for community partners to come together and have these difficult discussions. And this isn't even like this is not even going to be the most difficult discussion you guys are going to be having. That's going to happen in meeting 4, 5, and 6. So this is just to get you in the routine of talking about it, allowing room for people to disagree with each other. It's okay if you disagree. It's really important to have different viewpoints in the room. And so this is really intended to be this guided conversation. And then what you're going to do is you're going to phase into, so, well, what does homelessness mean in our community? So the purpose, and again, this is the facilitator agenda, so it has all the cheat stuff for you guys. Again, I went through it, as I said in the last webinar, I'm going through all the materials on Tuesday and then updating them on Wednesday. So again, make sure that you check them out after Wednesday. But I updated this one to include what the purpose of this section is. So when we want to have an understanding and consensus about common data elements, again, this is getting to the importance of a common assessment, using a common data system, using referrals in HMIS, which is a capability that everybody has but nobody really uses, and then have consensus about what your definition of homelessness means for your community. In Denton, for example, they had this conversation, I think so about this time last year maybe, and they, as a community, decided to use the HUD definition of what homelessness means, but they've also incorporated the definition from the Department of Education. So when they show data, they'll be showing data according to the HUD definition, and they'll be gathering data from their homeless liaisons to report on what homelessness looks like from the Department of Education perspective, because those are slightly different, right? So you're going to review the worksheet. You can do it 2 ways. One is, if your group's large enough, you can divide people into different groups, and you can have them talk about it and see whether there are similarities and differences, and then talk about it as a group. Or you can just go through each question together. And I would recommend using either a dry erase board or one of those large Post-its to write all the information, because what you're going to do at the end is you're going to mix it up. You're going to add it all up, mix it all together, and attempt to come up with your problem statement. You're also going to have a discussion about the information that you get from the worksheet. Again, this is try to get at the importance of having similar data elements that we gather, of having a common management information system that we utilize, and having the same definition of homelessness. So some questions that you can ask after you've gone through the data is, how confident is everyone in the data? What are your concerns? Can anybody think of, knowing the data that comes from HMIS or any comparable system, especially if you're reporting aggregate, can anyone come up with maybe a concern about the data? I have my eye on the question bar to see if anybody's going to write anything in. Five seconds. Okay, so I'll tell you what one of my concerns is. So because it's aggregate data, because it doesn't have, right, John Doe, this is all of his information, it's hard to tell from agency to agency who has been seen, right? So that's the value of having HMIS and that common data system, is that when I pull this data, I can see unduplicated numbers of people. So what you're going to see when you add up the numbers, especially the aggregate data, is it's going to look enormous. Like the scope of your problem is going to look huge, partly because there's probably going to be a lot of people who jump from agency to agency trying to get assistance. Another question could be, what would it be like to obtain a unduplicated number of people experiencing homelessness, which the answer to that is using a common management information system or doing more data sharing in some way. So again, it's intended to like do some analysis, do some thinking, do some education, and then to ask some questions and to be really thoughtful about this process. And then what you'll do is you'll develop a problem statement. So you'll go to this defining the scope of the homeless problem, and you'll go through and essentially you'll review and analyze the point in time count, HMIS data, which you're gathering via the worksheet, and any other local data sources. So that may be your domestic violence provider and their comparable database information. It may be your homeless liaison and their information. And then what you're going to do is you're going to create a definition of the scope of the problem. They even acknowledge it in here that it's probably going to be the best estimates, and that's okay. The important thing for later on in this process is that you guys assign numbers to the issue and try to define it as much as possible. And I thought I had an example. Or maybe they have an example. Okay, they have an example. So, so this sheet also includes a really great example of what it means, right? So at a point in time in our community, there are approximately 400 homeless people. Another thing that you can do in regards to your problem statement is differentiate PIT data and HMIS data or longitudinal data, right? Because those are two very different data points. Again, point in time, that's one data point. So this is on one given night, we know that there were this many people in our community who are sheltered and unsheltered. Utilizing our HMIS or our longitudinal data, we know that there are this many people that are served over the course of the year. So you may even want to do two different problem statements using those two different data points. And I even, on the facilitator's agenda, included bringing the 2016 PIT count report. The reason why I say this, to use the 2016 data and not the 2017 data, because, right, most of you should have your 2017 PIT report, is that 2016 is the year that you have a year's worth of data for in HMIS or any comparable system that's being used in your community. So that's why I say 2016 and not 2017. And then last thing you'll do is you'll wrap up, right? You'll thank, as you guys do with all of your meetings, you'll thank everybody for their time. You'll remind them of the next meeting, provide a brief overview. We're going to talk about the housing crisis response system, remind them to do the pre-reading. You'll get an email in the next 2 days. Don't forget to do it. We really tried to make sure that the reading isn't too much. So there may be like 5 pieces, but they're usually 1 to 2 pages. It's not a lot. If it's a longer piece, I only did 1. And then you're going to remind people that the qualitative assessment tools are due whenever you guys want them due, probably around like meeting 5 or 6. Probably around meeting 4 or 5. There we go. Let's see. There's a page that has the links for the videos if you need them. Again, the handout for what it means to end homelessness. And then lastly, you have meeting 2, which is the follow-up material. So there's 2 documents in here. The first is optional additional reading about ending homelessness. As you can see, I included the communicating effectively about ending homelessness because I think it's important for everybody that works in homeless services because all of our jobs is to end homelessness regardless of our funding source. This Ending Homelessness is Simple, but it ain't easy is a blog post from OrgCode, as is Ending Homelessness Slogan or Policy Proposition with Action. This one, I believe, was released last week. And then lastly, homelessness is a solvable problem, which is an Urban Institute piece on homelessness being a solvable problem. And then you'll have this handout, which includes required readings for meeting 3, which is information about what a housing crisis response system is, retooling it. I believe that reading Opening Doors is particularly critical. And then there's the optional webinar that people can view on retooling the housing crisis response system. That's kind of old. It's from 2012, which I can't believe is 5 years ago. So that's, again, optional, but I highly encourage you guys to emphasize that the required reading is required for a reason, because at the next meeting we'll be spending a lot of time speaking about the reading. Does anybody have any questions? If you've started meeting, has anything come up that you have concerns about or questions about? We're a quiet bunch this week. Okay, so since that's it, so that was meeting 2. Next week, same time, same place, we'll be meeting on meeting 3. Hopefully by then you guys will have met. Okay, thanks, Kim. Yeah, Lisa, let me send you the URL. I'm sending out the URL to everybody. If you have not gotten it before, did everybody get that? I think you need to highlight it and put it into your address bar on your Google Chrome or Explorer. So once you start meeting, as always, I'm available. Even before you start meeting, whenever, I'm here to help. You guys are not alone in this. There's a lot that needs to get done. Again, if you receive COC or ESG funding, you have to have your system set up, your coordinated entry system set up by January 23rd. So if you go through the toolkit and meet weekly, you should be set up really well to have your system in place by probably end of September, middle of October with the 100-day challenge. Any other questions or comments? So Michelle, as you are sending the information in this webinar as before, right? As some of us have been left out of the meeting. So Michelle, I wanted to talk about that today, so thank you. On our YouTube, if you search Texas Homeless Network, and if you go into our site, you can find Systems Change Toolkit. So I will be uploading everything. This one will start a little bit late because I forgot. Thankfully, I remembered. There's also, let's see, oh yeah. So if you go to Created Playlists, if you click on this, it'll add everything. Hi, everybody, can you hear? So what, excuse me. So what I tried to do in particular with the last one is there is the longer version of the webinar, but I also tried to break it into one, the piece that I just did the overview on, and then the other is the information on meeting 1 and the materials overview. So what I'm going to do, and thanks for the reminder, Michelle, is also in the toolkit, I'm going to include a link to the videos. So yeah, perfect. Thanks, Michelle. YouTube's a wonderful thing. Does anybody have any other questions? So I won't, and also to address that question, I won't be sending everything out right away. I'll probably be waiting until the end of the webinar series to let everybody know where everything is, just because I'll be adding to it consistently. So I'll just remind you guys every meeting that the materials will be available in the webinar overview meeting folder in the appropriate meeting. Let's see. Okay, I got some stuff. Some questions came in. Okay, that one is not for this. Perfect. Sounds good. One was kind of about coordinated entry. It was actually a request to FaceTime to discuss a workaround. Again, I'm available for all kinds of brainstorming. And then the other one was, so we have our Housing Equals Healthcare Conference. It's, I think, the biggest partnerships Monday through Wednesday of next week. And I'm looking forward to talking to Corpus Christi about your plans. Just so y'all know, Jesse, I'll be there in the afternoon on Monday. It's my birthday, so I'm just going for a group photo that we have to do, but I'll be there most of the day on Tuesday and then also part of the day on Wednesday. So if you find me, grab me and we'll talk. Anything else? Is anybody else coming to Austin for this? I was going to say symposium, but the summit, I think, is what we're calling it. If you are and you see me, stop me. I'd love to meet you if I haven't already, and we can talk about stuff. Okay, Lisa, we'll talk about that afterwards. So thanks, Alexa. So as many of you know, Texas Homeless Network facilitates vistas across the state of Texas, and we have several that are focusing on coordinated entry. So we have Alexis in Corpus, Lisa in Texarkana, and Catherine in Denton. And so I got a question about the deadline and whether it's related to the Vista project. Yes, it is, in that coordinated entry has to be implemented in Texarkana by that date. But I think you guys will be okay because you have a great foundation in place already. Okay, anything else? Last question. Thanks for the early birthday wish. Okay, so this is basically how the rest of the webinars are going to go. I'm going to open and see if anybody's met, if they have any questions, if anything's going on in their community that we need to know about, or they need help from the community, from our learning collaborative on. And then I'll go over the meeting materials. And that's pretty much it. It's pretty basic. I'm really hoping that as time goes on, you guys will be meeting and there'll be a little bit more discussion at the beginning, because I think that's where this process and this webinar will be pretty fruitful or beneficial for you. So yeah, looking forward to you guys meeting. I will see you next week. Have a great rest of your week.